at the moment.
So, Kurt, welcome again, and thank you very much for being with us. So we are all ears for your presentation.
Okay, well, let's share my screen. And I'm sharing just as a window because I want to look at the chat later. So, so I thought an interesting topic to talk about when I've worked on these agile transformations, what I find is that after a while, they seem to lose direction. And one of the things that occurred to me over time is that I use this phrase, losing its why, sort of a pun on the losing its way. So I want to talk about the role of goals in agile transformations and talk about different kinds of goals and ways to figure out whether your goal needs maybe a little bit of work. But before we start that, I want to do a little bit of a survey. So we're going to do a little experiment. And I just want you to think about your organization's goal for its agile transformation and think about what you'll measure or how you will know when it's achieved that goal. We're going to use the group chat in Zoom, but I don't want anybody's answer to influence other people's answers. So we're going to do it all at once. I want to give you maybe 30 seconds or so to think about the goal. Get ready, type it into the chat, but don't hit enter until I say yes. Does that sound good? Yeah. And let me pull up the chat window so I can see it. Where are we? Here we go. And here we go. All right. So if you are all ready, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and hit enter now. Okay. Anyone else want to contribute anything to that? Yeah. Okay, so we've got a few people who have responded, a few more coming in. I'll give you maybe another 30 seconds or so to respond on that if you have been thinking and typing. All right. So a variety of different answers. Meaningful work, fulfilled employees, more responsive to customer needs, doing a digital transformation, improving customer satisfaction, improving speed, being more innovative, accomplishing mission. So in some cases, no explicit goals for the transformation, or maybe they're implicit. However, a few more coming in. Happy employees, quality, time to market, more autonomy, less hierarchy. Right. So good. Well, thank you for doing that. So we've taken a look at some of the results. So let me step back and talk about why do we need goals. And so there's a humorous way to look at this. The great Yankees player and later coach Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. So that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is that Tom Peters noted that what you measure tends to motivate people to do things. And so goals can provide this motivational aspect. So I'm going to use a couple of different things from a framework that we've developed at scrum.org called evidence-based management to sort of illuminate some different aspects of goals and to give you some tools, mental tools to think about how to perhaps improve the goals and then how to inspect and adapt on those goals over time. So in evidence-based management, I don't want to make this a tutorial on evidence-based management, but you can find more, go to the scrum.org website. and download a white paper or a guide on evidence-based management. But in evidence-based management, one of the things that we do is we talk about 4 different kinds of value areas that organizations need to focus on. So there's things that are related to market value, like unrealized value. I'll sort of come back to that. Current value is some measure of what you're currently doing that's valuable for a customer. So, you can think of measures like Net Promoter Score being a proxy for the value that you're delivering to customers. You might more directly measure the value that you're delivering to customers, but that tells you how happy they are. Well, that basically tells you something about the value that you're delivering today. The concept of unrealized value tells you things about how happy could they be if you could figure out what other things they needed. So, they might be very happy with the level of service that you're giving them, but there's still a bunch of other things that they're unhappy about that perhaps you could provide more value there. So it gives you an idea about, should we keep investing? Maybe the customers are happy enough. So if the unrealized value was 0, you wouldn't need to invest anymore in improving the product. Those measures, those kinds of measures, tell you some things about market value and the value that customers experience. And then from an internal standpoint, the organizational capability, there are 2 areas that we like to think about. One is the time to market, which a number of you mentioned in terms of your goals. And the other one is ability to innovate. So time to market, pretty simple. How long does it take to deliver new value? And there are a variety of different ways that you might measure that. The ability to innovate is a little more subtle, but it's pretty simple. It essentially measures how much of the work that you're doing is actually contributing to value that customers experience. So you could look at things like, how many times do you get interrupted in the course of your daily work as a measure of your ability to innovate. You could look at how many meetings do you have to attend. You could look at, how much time do you have to spend maintaining old products versus doing, trying to work on new innovative things for customers. So these 4 measures, there may be other areas, but as we've looked at things, we find that these tend to cover a lot of different aspects of an organization's capability. So I want to use these as sort of lenses to focus on the goal question. And so you can roughly characterize the ability to innovate as a goal that would be something like be more efficient. And so, reduce interruptions, perhaps, spend more time working on innovative things versus keeping the lights on, spend more of your time doing things that customers ultimately value instead of internal sort of organizational overhead. Time to market sort of can be affected by ability to innovate, but it's related to sort of delivery. How long does it take to deliver? So things that might enable you to deliver faster might be breaking down the work into smaller batches and delivering smaller increments more continuously instead of waiting to deliver a much bigger chunk. That's one way to speed things up. Another way might be reducing handoffs between different parts of the organization, et cetera. So as we look at those things, are those kind of measures good goals? Well, I wouldn't argue that being more efficient or delivering faster is a bad goal, but there's kind of a critical question to ask yourself when you look at, if the goal of the Agile transformation is to improve your time to market, there might be an opportunity hiding inside that, and you can look at that by asking, why do you want to deliver faster? Why do you want to improve time to market? What will that enable you to do that would have potentially more value to your customers? So I often, when I've talked to organizations or worked with them in the past, if they say we want to be more efficient, I might, I ask, well, what would that do for you? And it might be simply to improve profitability, but it's often that many organizations start their Agile transformation by looking at, well, we can't each product release that we do doesn't really move the customer satisfaction needle very much. And so we want to become more efficient at delivering value, or we want it to be able to get new ideas to customers faster and improve time to market. So by asking why, you might find that the goal is really that, going back to some of the other measures that were in the chat window, it might be that you want to improve overall customer satisfaction, that you've got some sort of satisfaction gap that you want to close, and you want to be able to do that faster. Maybe your current delivery rate and your current effectiveness prevent you from making changes in that customer satisfaction faster. So that sort of leads us to this idea that the real goals for Agile transformation are often customer driven. So things like happy employees, having happy employees is a great thing. Maybe another goal might be to attract really highly skilled talent. And those are important, potentially intermediate goals, but the real goal is that you want to have those happy employees or highly skilled employees being able to do things for customers more quickly or more effectively. And so when I've worked with organizations, what I've often encouraged them to do is to think about, well, what will going faster, what will improving your time to market, or what will improving the employee happiness, what would that do for you? And then we try to formulate that as a goal and try to figure out, well, how would you know whether you've achieved that goal? And what kind of measures might you put in place to figure out those goals? So this figure kind of gives you an idea, more of a visual on unrealized value, because that often is where I think organizations, if they can articulate what they're trying to achieve in terms of some sort of gap between the current experience of a customer and the desired, that customer's desired experience, and identify that satisfaction gap, then you start to see, that's really what's closing that satisfaction gap is what's going to give you competitive advantage. And so the other things are important, and we'll talk about sort of the role of intermediate goals. But the ultimate goal of most digital transformations or agile transformations is to close some sort of satisfaction gap. You may not think of it in terms of that, but once you start thinking about that satisfaction gap, then it allows you to start looking for opportunities that that might exist, and essentially to be able to more effectively quantify, well, how would we measure that gap? How do we know if we're closing that gap? How do we know whether we're doing that better than our competitors are doing it? Are all sort of questions that you want to ask in your agile transformation. So in this agile transformation, oftentimes, especially when we talk about goals, I run into people who talk about goals need to be SMART. In other words, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. And so the question, do those ultimate goals for the agile transformation need to be SMART? And to answer that question, I'll sort of share with you a way of looking at goals over time. And so this is a picture that we use in the evidence-based management guide. And if you think about what you're trying to do with a goal, whether it's for your agile transformation or whether it's for a specific product, you have some particular starting place. You have a current state. You might actually measure that state and establish a baseline. And as you do work, basically, as if we use Scrum terms, as you do sprints, then every sprint is basically an experiment on how you might improve your progress toward that goal. You can also think about an agile transformation in the same way, that every basically improvement cycle is an opportunity to improve towards your goal. So, these little circles here represent sort of sprint or improvement cycles. And each one of those has a tactical goal, just in the sense that in Scrum, you have a sprint goal. And in that sprint goal, to determine what the sprint goal is, you look at, what are we trying to achieve for customers, and what product backlog items might we select that would help us move ahead. So every product backlog item is kind of a little hypothesis about improving customer value. So you form some hypothesis about, what improvements you could do to advance towards your goal. And then again, either product goal or some sort of strategic goal. And then you run the experiment, or in the case of Scrum, you basically do the sprint. You get results back, you inspect those results, and then you adapt your future plan. So the same thing works for, the same thing works for Agile transformations, is that you have some theories about what's going to improve your performance toward your overall goal. And as this little sort of, these little circles going in kind of a wayward path toward the goal indicate, sometimes you're right about that experiment, and sometimes you're not. Sometimes you think, well, what we really need to do is establish an automated build and test environment. And maybe you do that, and you find, as one organization I worked with, they felt like, their next improvement was to implement basically kind of a DevOps continuous delivery pipeline. And they did that, and they found that it didn't really improve their time to market very much, because where most of their bottlenecks were was waiting for other people in the organization to make a decision. And so, they implemented CI/CD. That helped a little bit, but it also uncovered that they had a lot of other things in their value stream that needed to be improved. So if you think about the organization, both teams and the whole organization, sort of progressing toward these goals through a series of experiments, then you're applying empiricism and applying this inspect and adapt process to the organizational improvement process itself. Now, the strategic goal here might be long-term, very ambitious, could be 3 to 5 years out. And the reason why in the picture it's moving around a little bit is because those strategic goals might be a little bit vague. And especially when you start off on the journey, they might be relatively, we want to improve our capabilities. But as you get closer to it, you start, a couple of things happen. One is that you inspect and adapt on the goals themselves. You get information that might tell you, well, our initial theories about what customers really wanted aren't really completely correct. And so we need to adapt our goals a little bit. And maybe, or maybe it's that a new market opens up and the strategic goal changes. Certainly we've seen a lot of that in the last year with COVID-19. Seen lots of opportunities for, lots of organizations have sort of, their strategic goal changed because they've now got a new set of conditions that they have to adapt to. And so along the way, intermediate goals, which might be 3 to 6 months out, give you some things to work towards. So in Scrum terms, an example of an intermediate goal is a product goal. But ultimately achieving that, you think that achieving that product goal or that intermediate goal will help you work toward your strategic goal. And you're inspecting and adapting that too. So the goals, all the goals should be ideally specific and measurable, but only the tactical goals are really actionable, realistic, and time-bound, because you don't know enough about the future in order to basically say, well, we know that that goal is actionable. Could be your strategic goal isn't actionable, but you'll find that out over time if you're using this kind of approach. And whether it's time-bound, maybe you think that it's achievable in 18 months, but it's really achievable in 9, or it's not achievable in 18 months. It's going to take 36 months to achieve that. So the farther you get out into the future, the less likely it is that the goals will be fully actionable, fully realistic, fully time-bound. But a tactical goal that's in a 3 to 4, sort of in the sort of 1 to 4 week time frame should be actionable, realistic, and time-bound, just like a sprint goal has to be all of those things. So to summarize, what I found is that a lot of organizations, they say that their goal with their Agile transformation is to be more agile or to be more responsive or to improve their ability to react to new situations. And that's a good goal. I mean, that's certainly necessary to achieve. But the question to ask is, what will that do for you? And what do you want? You know, once you've achieved that, once you're more responsive, then how do you translate that into improving your ability to execute on the strategy that's more long-term? So, you know, if you have a goal, if you listed a goal that was something like, you know, you want to go faster, or, you know, maybe improve quality, then the question to ask is why? What would that give you? And try to use that more short to intermediate term goal to think about, well, strategically, what do we want to achieve? And then inspect and adapt on all, both intermediate and strategic goals over time based on new information. So with that, I think that you know, we're sort of at a point where if you're interested in learning more, we've got lots of resources on scrum.org. There's this evidence-based management guide, which basically lays out in more detail the things that I was talking about. There are lots of case studies. There's a paper called Investing for Business Agility, which is about how to apply these ideas to more strategic portfolio management. There's a blog I wrote a while ago on using these concepts and applying them to OKRs. So I think you'll find a lot of interesting things that might help you in your Agile transformation journey. There are also a lot of other things on scrum.org. So if you're interested in finding more about that, you can look into these things. So I think with that, you know, hopefully that sets up some ideas and thoughts for the panel discussion. And I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk about the various case studies and experiences that the panelists have had. So when I turn it back to Sinan, and let me stop sharing. And
yeah, so
I think, let's see. There we go. Stop sharing.
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
Thank you very much, Kurt, for this mind-opening and also inspiring speech. It is always great to start asking with the question why. I mean, why are we doing all of these? It's a really powerful question, but most of the time, I mean, we forget about the reason why we're working on something. And that's why one of the questions that I prepared to address to the panelists is, why did your organization start with this transformation journey? But maybe before moving on to that, my first question is about maybe, I mean, for the ones that are not quite familiar to Agile. So Mehmet, I mean, as an Agile expert, also with a quite deep experience for more than 15 years. So my first question is to you. So we encounter Agile as a increasingly mentioned buzzword or in the past few years, but it all started 20 years ago in software development. And now it's spreading across several organizations from different industries. What is the story behind Agile, and why do you think it makes it is so popular nowadays?
Thank you. It's good to be here, and it was a good presentation, Kurt. Nice to see you. It has been a while we didn't met with you. So let me first start to your question by making a simple definition of Agile. For me, Agile is an ability to renew yourself. So maybe in other words, agility is the habit of learning, unlearning, and relearning. In order to understand why agility is so important, I think we need to first look at our understanding of management in the previous century. Then we can explore what is changing now and why, right? I think the main factor shaping our business life in the 20th century was the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution has brought mechanical and manufacturing-oriented understanding of business into our lives, right? So in that sense, if we check the organizations of the 20th century, we see that there are giant company organizations which are designed like machines, which works perfectly and designed to operate in an excellence. Also, when we check the 20th century organizations, we see that they're designed around function-based departments, which are really identical to the mass production line flow that Ford was the master of, right? Also, again, talking with the Ford example, when we look at the 20th century organizations, we see the thinker-doer distinction, which comes from scientific management theory proposed by Taylor, right? And this is another commonality of the 20th century organizations, a sharp separation of power between employer and worker, which is a command and control approach. So the management practices that we invented through the Industrial Revolution were perfectly addressing complicated problems, the problems of the last century. But we left the Industrial Revolution behind and entered a new digital-driven complex era, right? So this means basically that we also have to leave behind our understanding of that management, which comes with the Industrial Revolution. These two worlds are very different in terms of characteristics and the behaviors. So the complicated world, the world that we had a few decades ago, you can think it like Newton physics. On the other hand, today's world, which is a complex one, is more like quantum physics. What I'm trying to say is that the main characteristics of today's world is unpredictability. And this is important to understand, actually. So we are mainly talking about that unpredictability because because the technological enhancements are accelerated, the competition gets huge in the market. And as a result of these two, at least, now the power is started to shift from giant organizations to the consumers, right? Therefore, the management practices of that industrial age, which were invented to actually keep the power at the hands of giant machine organizations, can no longer live in a complex consumer-driven market. So I think that's why Agile and the Agile organizations are emerging. Agile organizations mostly focuses on value delivery instead of operational excellence that we used to in the last decade. And Agile organizations continuously evolve their establishment around consumer needs, not functions. So I think Agile is a new paradigm in the way we work today, and it's a new philosophy and culture, which is more human-centric and trying to help us to manage our new complex world with better results. And that's why it's hype in the last 5 years at least.
Wow, what a background. So this is like the last 120 years in a nutshell, in a couple of minutes. So quite a dense, let's say, summary. Thank you very much, Mehmet, for this introduction. So I would also now turn to Sevil. I mean, for those who are not familiar with Sevil Kayaş Yılmaz is the head of talent and strategy development of Vodafone Turkey. And so the transformation journey of Vodafone Turkey has been going on for more than 8 years, Sevil. And I'm very curious, starting with why, as just Kurt mentioned, what triggered the transformation of Vodafone Turkey?
Okay, Sinan, so thank you for the opportunity, because I'm really very happy to be here. Who wants to talk about Agile and who is really very curious about it. So I can say that, thanks to Kurt, because it was a really very, great presentation, asking the question why you want to, do Agile in your company. Because in the external market, I think everybody is really very familiar with that. All companies are, making decisions to do Agile, sometimes really very aware of that, sometimes not. So I think the purpose of doing Agile is the first question that we should, ask ourselves as the company. So maybe I think this is a really very good starting point. So yes, as you mentioned, in Vodafone, we are doing Agile for the last 8 years. So it started within the technology function, and 3 years ago, 2.5, maybe I can say, we enhanced it into the business units. So currently we have 6 tribes within the company, more than 50 squads. And I think the most important thing is, especially in Vodafone, what is different is, in these squads, technology people and commercial people are working together. So it is not just, under the technology function, but it is bringing commercial technology people who are not, very close to each other, by the way. Always they are working together. But on the other hand, there's a, distance between them to understand their language, requests, etc. So I think we are really very happy to have these squads in place, which has a really very good mix, by the way. So why we are doing in Vodafone Agile? I think it is not for the sake of doing Agile, by the way. It is because maybe it will be a little bit classical, but you know, the world is changing, our industry is changing, and the business models are changing. So everything is changing, by the way. So through all these changes, as a company, I think we have to change as well. So maybe we have a very, you know, good legacy systems, we have a really very good corporate culture, etc. But when you look at the competition, the market, the environment, competition environment, you can easily understand that you need to change. So this is the first thing I can say. So I think there are two things here under this change. So one of them is really responding to the customer needs, by the way, really very faster and in a more innovative manner. Because sometimes, you know, you consider customer, always you consider them. But on the other hand, when you look at the functional objectives, etc., sometimes you get far away from them. So I think the first reason for change is really understanding the customer needs, responding it really very quickly. And I think it is not just, you know, reactive, by the way, it should be proactive. So you need to understand the needs of customers without waiting anything from the customer, by the way. So this is the, you know, changing environment, market dynamics. And the second reason is, you know, as Vodafone company, we have a really very, you know, strong vision, which is becoming a new generation telco. So, you know, as you know, we are a telco company. Everything is changing also there. We want to become a new generation telco, which means that we have a really very strong core business, but we are also creating some new revenue, you know, channels to have some different, you know, commercial initiatives. So we want to become a new generation telco, especially using the power of digitalization. So there are two main reasons that we can say. So to achieve this, we really simplified our organizational model and acquired a more agile structure within the organization. And, you know, agile, you know, when you think about the go-to-market, all these kind of things, the competitive environment, I think agile is bringing speed in all these items. So I think really it is when you do agile, you know, you become more faster as a company. So this is, you know, one of the reasons. And I think these are the good business impacts, but on the other hand, there are some people impact as well. So we have lots of good improvements on the business KPIs, etc. But I think Agile is always also bringing some, you know, people benefits as well. So, for example, you know, people are feeling really very empowered when they, you know, work in an Agile environment, because there is no any hierarchy, so there is no any manager, any boss. So I think as a group, as a team, they come together, they decide together. So they feel the empowerment, they, you know, organize what they will do, and then they achieve together. I think all these kind of things are really helping people make more contribution in the business and also feel really very empowered, which also, you know, creates a positive engagement. So this is another thing, especially from people's side. And also, you know, when you think about the MVP, the customer needs, we were, you know, always trying to plan the, you know, best product for the customer. Always it was taking too much time. And after all of these, you know, months, years, because the customer need was changing, so, you know, you need to change also your projects after 1 year, 8 months, it doesn't matter. So I think MVP approach is also really very beneficial for the company, because you want to create the, you know, minimum viable product for the customers. You know, launch it in the market, you get lots of insight from the customer, and you really, you know, improve it with the insights that you are getting. So I think in Vodafone, after making an Agile, especially in the business units, I think, you know, because we tried it in the digital areas, such as digital sales, digital marketing, digital customer value management, we had lots of improvements, by the way. So thanks to Agile, I can say, although it has lots of challenges, to be honest, on the other hand, now we have a really very, you know, good time to market cycle. It is shortened, by the way. We have a really progressing quality, and also, you know, test and fail and learn culture is really, when I compare with the previous years, it is really getting good, better. So I think all these kinds of things are bringing really good improvements to the company.
Wow, again, so this is like 8 years in a nutshell. Again, Seville, thank you very much. So basically, I mean, you also kind of resonated with what Mehmet also said. So Vodafone has transformed into a much more consumer-centric company from a, let's say, product or let's say a company-oriented organization. And the transformation is, of course, ongoing now, and it's a journey that will never end. Thank you very much, Seville. So now turning from a telecom giant to a pharmaceutical giant, Roche, we have here with us Mehmet, the head of iSquad Center of Excellence team at Roche Global Product Strategy. And we also have Kathy from from San Francisco, who's head of the Lifecycle Team Office of Roche Pharmaceuticals. Welcome again. So, and I was also, I used to work at Roche for a while, and back at my, let's say, back at 2017, I think the global transformation has started while I was there. And what do you think that triggered transformation in Roche Global? Did Roche really have to transform? And what kind of changes have taken so far in Roche Global? Kathy, maybe we can begin with you.
Maybe I can take the first question.
Sure.
Yeah. And Kathy can take the second one. First of all, Sinan, thanks to you and ACM for inviting us. It's a real pleasure to be here. I feel like a Jedi Padawan talking after Kurt, because like we listened to the Jedi Master for half an hour. That was great. Thank you for the amazing presentation, Kurt. So I'll do my best to explain our perspective. As I said, as someone who is relatively inexperienced in the field. So did Roche have to transform? The short answer is yes. Roche is a huge company. It's one of the top 3 pharma companies in the world. And let's not forget, it came to that point by being very good at command and control. So it used to be a very good orange company. And if you look at the history, the company has reinvented itself again and again. The last revolution, so to say, was about like 15 years ago, when it transformed from a primary care pharma company to a biotech oncology company. I'm sure you know products like Bepanthen or Bactrim or Supradin. So these used to be Roche products. So Roche just decided to sell all those hugely successful products and got fully invested in oncology. So when I joined the company in 2014, at that time, 75% of sales came only from 3 products, 3 oncology products. And fast forward 10 years, in 2024, we expect 15 products to make up the same 75% of sales. And those initial 3 products are not among them. So these are the internal dynamics, huge changes. Also, the company is evolving from a biotech company to a personalized healthcare company. So these are the internal dynamics that I would like to mention. However, as Mehmet Yitman mentioned, the external world, it's getting a lot more complex. Healthcare demands are increasing. Healthcare systems are evolving as they're under financial pressure because populations are simply getting older and the system cannot sustain itself. So the company has decided to set an ambitious vision to make a larger contribution to this problem and to the society. Let me share the vision. It's bringing 3 to 5 times more benefit to patients at 50% less cost to the society. So if you think of it, this is a super ambitious target. Like if I refer to Kurt's presentation, in his bottom left corner, he said ability to innovate. So it might, superficially, it might mean we need to be 6 times more efficient because it's like 3 to 5 times more benefits at 50% less society. But it is much more than that. As I mentioned, Roche will have a lot more products, like 5 times, 10 times more products, and they are going to be smaller products, but you still need more or less the same number of people to work on those products normally, because the work for those individual products will not change, but we will not be able to increase our headcount by 5 times. So we need to think differently. We need to do things differently. So to fulfill that mission, We had to change. We have to change. And as Sevil explained, I mean, Agile has most of the answers that we were looking for. It is the right choice for such a big change. It puts the customer at the very center. Our pharma CEO said something in an interview that really stuck with me. He said, when you let the company focus on a mission that supersedes the organizational chart, then you start seeing brilliance at all levels of the organization. So I believe we have a very meaningful, very powerful, very ambitious vision and mission. And I believe this is very much in line with what Kurt called the real goal. And I think that perfectly summarizes what we are trying to achieve. So Kathy, maybe you can take the second question.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here. You know, and Mehmet, earlier when you were talking about the change in the business environment over the last decades, you know, the term that we use quite a bit at Roche is the VUCA environment that we work in, that volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment, which is a catalyst for us thinking about how we work differently. But if you think about the customer, our customer is ultimately patients. These are patients of serious life-threatening illnesses. For any one of us, wouldn't we want to have a medicine for that sooner, a better, more efficacious medicine? So it's a very compelling reason to get behind working in different ways. And as my colleague Mehmet mentioned, you know, 3 to 5 times more patient benefit at half the cost of society is a very inspirational target for us to achieve by 2030. The reality is it's a difficult transformation. Sinan, I think you used the term a breathtaking experience at Roche. So think about it. Roche is 90,000 employees. We're located in 100 different countries globally. So if you just imagined a city of a population of 90,000 people, we're all driving on the right side of the road, and now suddenly we need to change to driving on the left side of the road. It might be fine in certain neighborhoods, but where the challenge is at the intersections. And to me, that's analogous to what we're seeing at Roche. There are certain parts of Roche that have fully embraced an agile mindset and an agile way of working. They get both the being agile and the doing agile. Our commercial organization, you could say, is a little bit further ahead. Product development is kind of behind it, but our manufacturing and research groups are even, you know, further behind in that transformation. So where the challenges are is at that intersections. So, for example, part of the organization Mehmet and I work to support are the cross-functional medicine development teams. It completely makes sense for those teams to work in different ways, as Mehmet said, to be able to work on more medicines, but to be more innovative and to be faster, get the medicines to patients sooner. The reality is, if you think about Agile came from software, right? Very short development cycles. Developing a medicine takes about a decade and $2 billion. So it's part of like what parts of Agile are fit for purpose for developing a medicine. And there are some parts of the organization that are able to do it a little bit more intuitively and easier, might I say, than other parts. So at this point, you know, we've got more innovation, more looking at not just the medicine, but the diagnostic. In many ways, we're a data company. How do we leverage that data? But boy, speed, we're not there yet. I can see that we've barely shaved off months at a time, but when you're looking at decades to get a medicine developed, it's not quite enough. So it's a lofty ambition. People are inspired by the ambition, and it's honestly a little bit daunting. And certainly working in the past year in a global pandemic, I think we might all be feeling a certain level of fatigue. But when you ground yourself in the customer that patients are waiting, it's hard not to get behind it.
Yeah, exactly. So the transformation, and especially in a pharma company, is always, let's say, more inspiring, because, I mean, your purpose statement is definitely so meaningful for all of us. And of course, when you take a look at the drug development cycle, which takes more than 10 years, but I can't keep myself of comparing it versus the vaccine development process during COVID. So, I mean, when you have to, then of course it is possible to shorten that process and come up with a solution that is viable to the larger society. And so maybe by the use of artificial intelligence and big data, I'm very optimistic that, I mean, in a complex environment, in a way that we cannot foresee from today, maybe in the following 9 years, I mean, you're going to be able to shorten that period and make it much more cheaper. So my question now comes to Mehmet Yiğitmen, again to you. So, I mean, the Vodafone Turkey's transformation has been ongoing for more than 8 years. And so Kathy and Mehmet Can explained already that their transformation traces back to 2017. And it seems to, let's say, to keep going on for a long while. So when does an agile transformation is complete? I mean, based on your experience.
Thank you. Not sure whether it will be completed someday, but to give a very short answer about thinking how it looks like in Vodafone Turkey, the keyword I think is fun. Maybe Sevil also can comment on that, but I think it looks fun. But how we can really understand an organization, whether it's an agile organization or not, how an agile organization looks like. Let's try to focus on that, explore on that a bit. I think the nature of the main technological drive of an era shapes the way we live and the way we understand the work. So it was like the industrial age, as I mentioned. So in order to explore it, I think it is necessary to look at the nature of the digital revolution that shapes our lives today. So let's first try to check the essence of the digital world, and it will, I think, will help us to understand the 21st century organization structures, behaviors, their dynamics, and how the agile organization will look like. When I say the digital world, I basically try to mean internet. You can think it like the internet, right? Or maybe even you can think it like blockchain. If we started to examine the characteristics of internet, I think we can achieve the understanding of the 21st organization dynamics. So first of all, it's a question too. Tell me, where is the center of the internet? So I think we cannot talk about the center of it, right? So the digital world has a decentralized and distributed structure. So in this manner, I think it's possible to say that the new agile business world has evolved into a new organizational structure form, which is a network of multidisciplinary small teams, instead of that centralized functional department structures that we had in the previous century. So basically, I think you can imagine this as a network of very small startups that are established around different consumer needs, instead of having one powerful but cumbersome Titanic-like structure. So I think that's the first thing that you need to go and check. Another question is, when we check the internet, the digital world, I think it is a structure which is alive, which is constantly evolving with interactions, right? So in that sense, I think we see that the organizations transform into an organic form that are alive and that evolves instead of mechanical and static pyramid structures. So we call this as fluid or progressive organizations. And actually this means that we need to be ready to constantly change how we organize our people inside. So it should be dynamic. It already started, but it will be more, I guess. If we look at the internet again, who is the boss of the internet? Who is the authority on the internet? I guess we cannot talk about existence of any authority. Maybe the consumers, right? So in this sense, I think we see that in the new agile world, the power also has passed to the teams, and the autocratic top-down management approach has been replaced by the serving leadership concept. And it already started for the last decade at least, right? So in an agile organization, the teams are empowered and accountable, and leaders serve to the teams, which is the exact opposite of what we had before, right? Maybe lastly, I can talk about the internet, is the ease of access to the information and the increased transparency, right? So likewise, I think we can say that in the new agile world, cooperation and team spirit come to the fore with transparency rather than individual perspective that keeps the knowledge to itself and doesn't share with the others, right? So in an agile organization, I think we can talk about radical transparency and high-level organization. So to sum up, one can consider itself as an agile organization when you start to really listen to your customers and organize yourself dynamically as small empowered teams around that customer needs. That's hard. Also, when you get rid of hierarchy of authority and minimize the internal bureaucracy, that's even harder, I guess. And also, when you constantly welcome change and renew yourself to trigger and lead a change. And maybe finally, I can say that when you create a constant flow of innovation to the market. Okay, so these are the signals that I can think of to think about an agile organization, or to say an organization it is an agile one or not. In this manner, how long does it take to be an agile organization? I don't know, but at least I can say that it is not short, as we already listened to the stories from Vodafone and Roche, right? But I think it depends on your current situation and how much you stand for this transformation.
Yeah, good. So the resemblance of agile organizations with the internet, with respect to decentralization, is always striking. And I mean, it is a network-like organization that is external oriented and that is fluid, like an organism that is alive. So like an organism, it continues to adapt to changes in the external environment. So when the organization turns out to be something like this, then maybe, and it is not an easy transformation. So as Kathy already explained, a lot of functions within a huge organization consisting of 90,000 colleagues are still, they still have a lot of way to go. So maybe it can even take more than a decade. So we will see the transformation, of course. But I'm also very curious about the gains so far. So, I mean, there have been dramatic changes in both of the organizations. I mean, based on those, let's say, evolution so far, what kind of, let's say, tangible outcome do we have in hand? So, I mean, if you have also specific figures for us to even, let's say, understand it in a much more concrete way, it would be very, very helpful if you may also share. So maybe starting with Vodafone, Seville, in the past 8 years. So what can you share?
Okay, super. Sinan, maybe going back to your question to Mehmet Yitman, so it will never end, by the way. This is how I feel about Agile. Because, you know, Agile is just the starting point. So it never happens in this way. So let's make a decision to do Agile. Let's change the organization in an Agile, you know, way of working. And then everything will go well. So it doesn't happen like this. If you make a decision to bring some agility to your company, it means that you should invest in everything, by the way, in the culture, in the people, in the expertise, in the tools, processes, etc. So we can easily say that, to be honest, it's just a starting point. So it's a challenging, you know, journey. And I think the most important thing here is really the top management sponsorship, by the way. We are really very lucky in Vodafone because, you know, our top management is really believing in Agile. They are, you know, giving great support to do it in the organization. But if it is not in place, then, you know, it is really very challenging for you. So when I come to gain, so, you know, as I try to mention that there are lots of, you know, progress in the business KPIs, you know, go to market cycles, etc. But I want to, you know, open a different perspective, from people side. So we are always conducting some surveys, especially for the people who are working under tribes, because it's a totally new way of working. We have lots of young people within the organization because of the sector, by the way. So we are doing it to understand if people are really very engaged in the process or not. So I will give you some numbers, just to show how people feel while they are working in an agile environment. So looking at the numbers, so I can say that 97% of people believe that there is no any hierarchy. Everyone can be a part of the topic to create a value. This is something really very important, because if you believe in that, it means that there is a purpose there for you. So this is really great. So 94% of people say that, considering everything, they are really very, very happy to work in agile teams. Although the challenges, there are lots of challenges, etc. But on the other hand, they are really very happy to be a part of it. So 86% of them say the priorities and objectives of Squad is really very clear to them. So Mehmet İtmen mentioned about the transparency. I think Agile brings very, too much transparency within the ecosystem regarding the objectives, challenges, failures, all these kind of things. So people feel that their objectives are really very clear when they are, working in a Agile setup. So 82% of them believes that Agile way of working allows them to develop and learn different skills. So, in each squad, for example, in Vodafone, everybody is responsible for one role, one job. But because you are working with, technology people, when you are from a commercial team, I think you learn more, not only your expertise area, but really you learn more and you contribute more, because you decide everything together. And in all the meetings, you have the chance to listen, to understand why it is happening in the other side of the world, So it also, a great opportunity for you to develop yourself. And the last thing, 80% of people thinks that there is a very transparent and clear communication within the team and between the squads. So if it is within the squad, it's really very easy. If it is within the tribe, it can be easy. If it is between tribes, then it is more difficult. But if you find a way to have a really good, communication, integration between the tribes, then it will, feel people very happy with a really high level of transparency. So these are the, things that I can share from Vodafone with the real numbers. And the last thing that I want to share is, we are also measure the maturity, agile maturity of the squad tribes as well. So when you look at the last measurement, it is 4/5. So which means, when you look at the strengths, it is the customer focus, agile culture, and skill development. These are the really, strengths that people are feeling. And of course, there are some opportunities. And if you wonder it, it is the governance and the budgeting, by the way. So this also shows you should manage your dependencies with a really very simple governance. By the way, there is a room there. We really, improved a lot, by the way, when I compare with the, 2.5 years ago, especially when we, started to enhance in the business unit. But 4/5 is a really very good, score when you think about the agile maturity. So I think there are lots of, gains within agile, I can say.
Yeah, and it's also, for me, very inspiring that, when I asked for the organizational gains, you did not necessarily speak about the business outcomes. The increase in profitability, the time to market, etc. So business-centric metrics, but you rather prefer to talk about the, let's say, the satisfaction of the employees.
Yes,
and
I started from there, Sinan. Sorry for interrupting, but everything starts with people, by the way.
Yeah.
So if people really feel the purpose, if they really enjoy their job and their working environment, then they will achieve the results. So I think all the people, think this is not, I'm coming from HR, by the way, to be honest, but it is really like this. So because of that reason, I want to, share some numbers from the people side, not from business side.
Yeah, that also kind of indicates the level of maturity that you have reached in the Turkish organization with regards to agile transformation. And I would now like to turn to Kathy and Mehmet. So what kind of, let's say, quick gains you could achieve so far? in Roche?
So this is an interesting question, and maybe we have a slightly controversial view on this one. How to measure success? We asked this question to ourselves, especially a lot in the beginning. And I think now we ask it a bit less, I would say, because of having that pharma vision that I've shared with you. For us, that is very key. What we think is like measuring such KPIs is a very dominant exercise in orange in companies, orange organizations. And like, what have we gained from having, let's say, 26 KPIs for a product launch? How much did it change? Maybe not. Maybe we ended up, setting us targets that we could catch. So it's a somewhat cynical game. So we decided that maybe we do not have such measurements, and we focus on the mission itself. And it's like, you will know when you get there. So we have been focusing on that. It's a more long haul journey, I would say. Still, we are in early days compared to Vodafone, for instance. It's been 4 years since the global organization has begun, but it's such a huge company, like almost 96,000 people working in this company, and it's bit by bit. So it's not like the whole company went into this. So we are on a different journey, I would say. Having said that, we see a lot of positive changes, and maybe Kathy can talk about them.
Yeah, thanks, Mehmet. I think that was a terrific way to respond. And I'm thinking about Kurt, what you said about what you measure is where there's going to be an impact. And this has really been a little bit of a challenge for us as an organization. Even when you were talking about goals, we're shifting our mindset to think more about, instead of talking about goals, think about outcomes. What is the impact of the effort, both in midterm and long-term outcomes, like a 3 to 5 year window and a longer window than that. So candidly, I think it's an area maybe we could have a little bit better discipline, but we don't want to get back into the measuring, monitoring. It almost feels like it might be a little bit pulling back into an old way of working. So we're still trying to find the right balance of that.
Excellent. So there is also, already a lot of, let's say, transformation with regards to mindset, as I interpret from your responses, but it's going to be much more tangible in the years to come from a business point of view as well. And so now I would like to turn to Slido for some of the questions that the participants have, let's say, raised. And the most popular one comes to you, Kurt. So the anonymous attendee asked, how can we measure unrealized value and current value, and especially the satisfaction gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at a really coarse-grained level, you can measure things like market share, and sort of as a relative measure of how well you're satisfying your customers relative to your competitors. A more fine-grained way of doing it is to conduct things like focus groups and also measurement in applications. Interviewing customers to try to understand what they're really trying to do. So there's a lot of literature around this concept of jobs to be done. If you look at people like Clayton Christensen back in the really now early 90s. There were some related books on that. And what it is that the customer's trying to achieve a particular goal. They're trying to achieve something in their life. As Kathy mentioned, they're trying to either eradicate the effects of a disease or be completely cured from the disease. So you could look at the gap between how effective your treatment is relative to completely eradicating that disease. In the case of a pharmaceutical company, in the case of let's say a bank, you could try to understand. So, you might think that the customer wants to get a loan, but actually the customer doesn't want to get a loan. The customer wants to purchase a house, or they want to purchase a car. So anything that, maybe what you do is offer services that make it easier for them to purchase the thing that they want to do, want to purchase with the loan. So it requires you to look at it from the customer's perspective and saying, what are they trying to achieve? And how effective are we at helping them to achieve those things? And then, you can make other measures of current value. You could look at things like, how frequently do people use certain features in your product? This is a really easy thing to do, especially for a digital product. And, you might find that, they don't use 60-70% of what you've delivered to them. So they don't think that there's any value in what you've delivered on that. And you might look more at, well, what could we deliver that would be more valuable? But usually it involves talking to people, having the teams who are delivering the product usually talking to the people directly and asking questions. What are you trying to achieve? What would help? What could we do to help you better achieve that? Is largely the answer to the question.
Thanks a lot, Kurt. And so, I mean, we have already exceeded the time that we predetermined, but it is not very easy to find valuable guests like yourself all around the same table. So, I mean, if you allow me, I would like to raise 2 more questions. Maybe it will take another 8 to 10 minutes tops, I would guess. And so I'm now looking back to Slido. The next question comes to you, Sevil. So the question is, what was the most difficult thing to have managers let go of their control instincts? And how did you overcome that in such a huge organization?
It's a great question, by the way. Yes.
And I think that this should not necessarily be limited to, I think, Vodafone, but maybe we can listen to you, Kathy and Mehmet, maybe around this as well. Yeah.
Okay. So let me try to answer really very quickly. So I think Agile brings also a cultural transformation as well. It is not only just related to the business. So, we are all, having discussions around that also. And when I look at the culture, of course, what is the, biggest challenge is regarding the leaders. So as Mehmet mentioned, so you have to be really a servant leader. So try to understand what are the feelings, needs of other people. So how you can support them. But if you really try to control them, if you, try to make some decisions instead of them, then everything will be, worse. So because of that, we always, invest in leadership, by the way, in Vodafone, not only for the Agile leaders, by the way, because leadership definition is also changing. When you look at, especially for the last 5 years, it's totally changing. So we are always, developing some programs, etc., especially for leaders, The second thing is, there is how can I say, really very transparent communication between the team members, squad members, and also the chapter leaders, mostly on the, expertise skill side. But again, they have lots of, feedback platforms. They can easily, share their thoughts, feelings with each other. And the third thing that I can say is, squads are really great, groups to achieve the targets. But on the other hand, you need to invest on the teamwork again. So we have some specific programs, especially in Vodafone, such as Let's Agile, team building activities. So, for example, sometimes we get one squad to really, strengthen the teamwork in that squad. Sometimes we get different squads from different tribes, which has really a high level of dependency, and sometimes have some conflicts there. So there are lots of team activities. We say team everywhere. These are very special programs for Agile squads that, everybody can understand how they can, strengthen their teamwork within the squad, within the tribe, or between the tribes, I can say.
I'll jump in here too, because boy, spot on. That is really, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. So think about, not to stereotype, but think particularly with our scientists, right? For many of us who've worked in an environment for decades where knowledge is power and your expertise and being sought out for your opinion and inclusiveness. And now we're asking these leaders to empower others and to embrace be, the joy of being left out of those discussions. It is a very difficult shift for many leaders in the organization. So we continue to put a focus on the being agile, the mindset piece. I think that the work that we've been doing, particularly with one-on-one coaching and team coaching with teams, helps leaders through that process of understanding their, reactive behaviors and how to be more of a servant leader, work in more creative, expansive ways. But that unto itself is going to be a transformation that will take time, particularly if you've been working in a certain way for decades. It's not a switch that can be flipped. So spot on. It's about the mindset piece that is a key part of it.
I'd like to add one thing to that as well. Oftentimes when I think of organizations, I've come to think of organizations not as a machine for getting things done, which is sort of the old industrial mindset, but it happens to be basically a status reward network that happens to get things done as a byproduct. And so what Kathy was just saying is that if you're leading this transformation, what you have to do is figure out ways of rewarding certain kinds of behaviors and discouraging other kinds of behaviors. And you have to provide people with mechanisms in which they can achieve status in different ways. So in the old organization, you achieve status as an individual contributor. And now you would, in the Agile organization, you achieve status as a member of a team that accomplishes an important goal. But these sort of high status individuals like scientists and other people and managers who've had status in the old organization, you have to basically provide them with ways that they can productively earn that status by being coaches, by being supportive servant leaders, and by providing recognition opportunities for them. Otherwise, what you find is that there's an undercurrent of distrust and suspicion about this new organizational change. And all of that sounds very sort of squishy and touchy-feely, but when you start looking at it through a status lens, you start identifying who's going to benefit from this change that we're trying to promote, and who's going to be hurt by it, and then try to intercept the people who are going to be hurt by it and figure out ways that they can contribute in different ways. Because in a sense, they thought they were signing up for one kind of job, and now you're changing the job. Like there was that book out some years ago now, probably a decade ago, Who Moved My Cheese? And it's very much of that kind of thing. And you never underestimate that power of that existing status machine in basically derailing what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and Kurt, you're making me think from a neuro leadership perspective. As human beings, we're hardwired to see threat more than reward, right? If you miss a reward, you miss lunch. If you miss a threat, you are lunch. So I think whenever there's any kind of a change, the natural reaction is to think of what is the threat to my status, to my autonomy, to my relationships, whatever it might be. So it's a very real challenge to address.
So maybe
if I can.
Sorry, Mehmet, please go on.
Yeah, no.
So I would say,
thanks.
I think to deal with all these kind of concerns and threats, I think you need to have a really very good change plan, not communication plan, but change management plan, by the way. Because what we experience in Vodafone is, Vodafone is a really very big enterprise company. So we are not doing Agile everywhere. So we are doing it is the consumer and, enterprise business units and technology in total. But on the other hand, you need to explain why you are doing Agile in the company to the rest of the organization, not only the tribes, but also the other functions as well, because you shouldn't make any differentiation between these two groups. So I think because of that reason, the purpose, how you are explaining it to the company employees and how you are, behaving in an inclusive way, by the way, really helps you. So for this, I think you need to have a really very strong change management plan, including considering all different, stakeholders within the organization. So we did lots of things, by the way, in Vodafone. So trainings, communications, roadshows regarding Agile. So our top management went to the, Agile flat just to see how these people are, working, etc. I think because of that reason, I said it is just a starting point. So you have to invest on everything after making any decision regarding Agile.
One thing to add about the thing you mentioned, Katie, actually about being a lunch. That's very right, actually, because what I see is an obstacle as the fear of feeling useless. Because in the current structure, managers are heavily involved within the operation, even that I prefer to call them as foreman managers in that sense, right? So therefore, we see that current managers feel emptiness when they start to leave the operation to the team, because the management needs to be owned and led by the teams by themselves, right? So then what will I do? That's the question that comes with the managers, I think. Perhaps this might be perceived as a comforting element in the beginning, but in fact, we speak of an emptiness that makes one feel useless after a while. So it's not easy, but actually, you know what they say, important changes start with a bit of stomach. So then I think that pain should be used as a drive to make the managers to be transformed into leaders who cares their people, who cares the culture, and who lets their people to grow. And this is not a easy shift to make, and it sometimes may make you feel like you are the lunch.
Excellent. And I mean, this is also a lot of learning for me. I mean, the level of simplification here is really amazing. Another note that I took, important changes require a stomach, right? With a stomach, you said, Mehmet. Cool. So, I mean, just before we conclude, just one final question, where maybe you can share only one or two sentences. I mean, for the organizations that are considering pursuing an agile transformation but have not initiated anything yet. So what would your advice be? How should they start? So maybe we can begin with you, Kurt.
Is the question define agile transformation in 3 words?
No. I mean, in one or two, in one or two sentences, maybe.
No
I mean,
way.
yeah.
You cannot say it, by the way, with 3 words. It will not be possible.
No. I said only a few sentences for the sake of time management. So, I mean, only in a few sentences. I mean, how would you like? Let's say, how would you recommend them to start this journey?
Well, I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, having a clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve and then communicating that is really the starting point for me. Otherwise, you tend to just mimic agile behaviors, and you're not actually pursuing a goal. So I think I start with the goals and then figure out how to achieve those.
So starting with why and communicating that reason with the rest of the organization. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Kurt. And who'd like to add?
Maybe I can continue.
Sorry, go ahead.
Katie,
no. Go ahead, Sibel. Go.
Okay. So very quickly, I will mention 4 things, by the way. So first one is piloting. Because if you pilot something, you can learn lots of things, by the way, and you can use those learnings in the second phase, third phase. So piloting will be one of my suggestions. Second one is doing it really very properly, by the way. If you make any decision, for example, to transform your organization into an agile structure, I think doing it properly will be great. Otherwise, it will never happen. This is the second thing. The third one is invest on the expertises, by the way, because expertise areas are really very critical for the success of Agile. So I read a question in the chat, if I read it correctly, by the way, regarding our turnover, especially within the tribes. I also try to explain it very quickly. So if you look at the company overall turnover, it is the lowest ratio, especially for the last 4 years. When you look at the Agile people, tribes, it is increasing, by the way. Why? Because expertise is really very valuable within the external market. Just because of the e-commerce and high-tech companies, because they are growing very fast, double digit, getting investments, as as you were discussing at the beginning, Sinan. So they need lots of, people, and they pay too much for the expertise. So we are losing some of our people to the e-commerce, companies, to be honest. But this doesn't mean that people are not happy within Vodafone. They are getting, too much salary, by the way, sometimes, and it happens because we are human. So I think these three things are really very important. And the last thing from my side will be develop your agile coach really proactively. Don't wait for the transformation to start, because all these people are really taking very active role during the transformation. And if there is a really, good people there, transformation becomes easier. So maybe if you, make any decision regarding agile, proactively you can, develop your agile coach accordingly. So these are, the things that I can share with you.
Thank you, Sevil. Kathy?
I know we're at time, so I'll just say the three words that came to my mind is evolve, learn, fail. It's an evolution. It takes time. Just have the mindset of constantly learning. And I think of the word fail stands for first attempt in learning. It's a journey.
Thank you, Kathy. So I only asked for a couple of sentences, but you even came up with only 3 words. Thank you. Do you have any addition, Mehmet?
Yeah, I'll say one thing. You need to try to master change until it becomes a source of competitive advantage. So it's a long journey. It doesn't happen overnight. But you need to embrace change, and then the rest will come.
So Rome was not built in a day, Mehmet. Mehmet,
For sure.
Yitman, so do you have an addition?
I will also accept the 3-verse challenge coming from Tolga. Experimental.
Actually, three letters maybe is enough.
3 letters.
Yeah, that's another one.
It's a radical improvement now. Keep it incremental. So I think what I will say is experimental, challenging, and fun. So if you don't feel like this, so if you're not, get the thing as experimenting, if you don't feel yourself challenging and also having fun of the journey, then most probably you're not transforming.
Excellent. And so it's been more than an hour and a half. So it's early morning, Kathy. So I'm sure that there are a lot of emails awaiting you, also you, Kurt. And for the other ones, maybe the other people are, the families are waiting in the dinner table. So I would like to thank everyone for being here and for your enthusiasm and also your valuable contributions. And hoping to remain in touch and maybe see you again in future organizations. And thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also, I would like to thank the more than 50 people, the participants here who have joined us along this discussion and have remained there. And we reached, I think the highest figure was around 100, and now we're around 50.
Yeah. I think they deserve the whole day, by the way, Sinan. So tomorrow it will be a public holiday in Turkey, and everybody deserves it. So have a nice whole day. Thank you for having us.
Big thanks to the audience as well. So thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Nice
you.
holiday. Thank you all. Bye.